Elijah Peterson never hurried anymore. Time was when he'd ridden with purpose, driven by destinations and duties. But grief had taught him a different rhythm one, measured in Lucy's steady hooves and the whisper of wind through prairie grass. He was nobody's lawman now, nobody's hunter, and no longer any woman's husband. Just a man carved hollow by loss, weathered hands and shoulders broad enough to carry sorrow, eyes that had forgotten how to shed tears. Lucy stopped without his command. Ears pricked, sensing what he couldn't yet see. Elijah dismounted in one fluid motion, boots finding purchase on the sun-baked earth. Something hung wrong in the air, too quiet, touched by smoke and violence. He pushed through the sagebrush, and there it lay before him. The wagon train looked like broken bones scattered across the desert. Canvas hung in tatters, wheels splintered, bodies arranged in death's careless choreography. The silence spoke louder than screams ever could. Raiders, or men who rode for darker reasons than gold. Men who found music in others' terror, moving with reverence for the dead. Elijah surveyed the carnage. A child's bonnet still clutched in lifeless fingers, a man's face buried in cold ashes. The acrid smell of gunpowder and burnt dreams lingered. Like incense at a funeral mass, he knelt. Not in prayer. Words had lost their power to heal such wounds, but to listen. That's when he heard it, breath so faint it might have been wind. Behind the charred wagon wheel, wrapped in fur-lined fabric, lay a woman. Ash painted her face like war paint, dark hair tangled in knots that told stories of struggle. One hand grasped at emptiness, fingers dancing between consciousness and whatever dreams the dying see. She was older than first glance suggested. Not some preacher's daughter, but a woman shaped by years and choices. Her gown, though torn, whispered of quality lace collar, pearl buttons that caught light like tiny moons. One glove remained pristine on her right hand while the left lay bare, knuckles raw with survival. Without words, he gathered her weightless form against his chest. Lucy accepted this new burden with only a snort of recognition at the copper scent. Clinging to them both, the dying sun painted the landscape red as warning as they rode toward home. His cabin waited 5 miles west, tucked beneath cottonwoods like a secret kept by the hills. He built it with his own hands after Mary's passing, each plank a prayer, each nail a promise to keep breathing. Now it felt less like refuge than memorial. Inside, orange firelight danced across rough-hewn walls. He placed her on the narrow cot, tended her wounds with the gentle precision of a man who'd loved someone fragile once before. Night wrapped around them thick as wool, while crickets sang their ancient hymns and somewhere an owl questioned the darkness. He kept vigil through the long hours, back pressed to weathered wood, watching the rise and fall of her ribs, counting each breath like a miser counts coin. Sleep was a luxury he couldn't afford, not when life hung by such delicate threads. Dawn crept in slowly, painting the world in mist and possibility. She stirred like a bird testing damaged wings, eyelids fluttering before opening wide with confusion. Bright as morning stars. When she tried to speak, he gentled her with words deep as riverbeds. Rest easy. You're safe here. Her gaze wandered the humble roomwood stove, single chair, a woman's portrait in its chipped frame, his rifle standing sentinel against the wall. She drank water with shaking hands, as if afraid it might vanish before touching her lips. When he asked for her name, she looked down at her gloved fingers, jaw working around silence. I've forgotten, she whispered, though the lie sat awkward on her tongue. He didn't press. Everyone carried their reasons. Then we'll wait for memory to find you again. Days unfolded in quiet rhythms. She slept, ate spoonfuls of broth, wept silent tears while staring at nothing. He worked outside, chopping wood, tending animals, checking her welfare with the careful attention of a gardener watching new growth. She began observing how he moved, deliberate, economical, never wasting motion or words. Not cold, but careful, like a man who'd learned that gentleness was the world's rarest gift. By the third morning, strength returned enough for her to reach the door. He found her there wrapped in his coat, studying the endless sky as if reading scripture written in clouds. You'll catch your death, he said without urgency. I needed to see heaven still turned above us. It does, whether we ask or not. She looked at him then, truly looked, her eyes the color of stormlight over water. Something noble and shattered lived in that gaze. Perhaps I shouldn't have survived. But you did. I don't know who I am anymore. He joined her at the threshold, watching wind move through grass like invisible fingers. Then don't rush the knowing, let it come natural. They stood in companionable silence, something fragile as spider silk weaving between their quiet hearts. In the distance, a crow cut through morning light, and the earth held its breath as if waiting for whatever came next. Sunlight poured through windows in golden streams, catching dust motes that danced in the hushed air like tiny spirits. She woke from dreams that tasted of nightmares, blinking at the ceiling as if unsure whether consciousness brought safety or fresh torment. Elijah stood at the stove, stirring something fragrant in a battered pot. When she sat up too quickly, gasping at the sharp protest in her ribs, he steadied her with quiet authority. Easy now. Hell's behind you. Rest is what you need. Her fingers traced the singed lace at her wrist, delicate beauty surviving in this rough place. She studied the simple room, noting the hand-carved chair, the boots by the door, everything built to last by careful hands. What's your name? She asked over soup that tasted of earth and patience. Elijah Peterson. The name felt foreign on her tongue, something to treasure in the space between her ribs and whatever remained of her own identity. When she tried to stand, wobbling like a newborn colt, he steadied her without asking permission. She accepted help for only a moment before pride straightened her spine like steel. I need air. Outside, the prairie rolled toward distant horizons, wildflowers pushing through dust near fence posts with stubborn beauty. A hawk circled overhead, watchful as any guardian angel. They killed everyone, she said finally. Yes. She didn't weep or tremble, just watched the sky as if it might offer absolution. He'd buried them as best he could before storms came. She nodded once, throat working, around unspoken words. You're not from these parts, he observed, a long way east. Your accent speaks of caring once, then stopping. Something like understanding passed between them, grief as a language only certain souls truly spoke. I was traveling to a place I didn't want to go, she admitted. That wagon was never going to take me anywhere I hadn't already lost. You're running, aren't we all? He gazed toward distant hills where cloud shadows painted the earth in shades of memory. I'm not running anymore, just waiting for the world to settle. I'd like to stay briefly, just until I remember how breathing works. You can. That evening she helped prepare dinner, hands unsteady but determined. He watched her move with muscle memory rather than comfort, each small task a victory over whatever had broken her. Did you have a husband? He asked gently. He died. No explanation followed. None was needed. They sat in firelight, shadows dancing on worn floorboards. She traced her cup's rim while he carved a new handle for a broken drawer. The world beyond these walls might have been myth. Later, standing at the threshold of the small guest room, she turned to him. You don't ask many questions. I don't believe in buying trust with noise. Thank you, Elijah. His name sounded different in her voice, dressed in silk and memory. That night she dreamed of salt water and marble staircases, of ballrooms echoing with names she no longer answered to. But waking brought only ember glow and the steady shadow of a man who kept faith through silence. Not safety, not yet. But for the first time in countless days, morning held no dread. Days stretched like golden thread between careful fingers. Without discussing it, they found their rhythm. He chopped wood, she gathered kindling. He hunted, she prepared whatever he brought home with hands growing steadier each day. Motion in grief became their salvation. One morning she kneaded dough while he was away, flour streaking her wrists like chalky prayers. When he returned to bread's warm scent filling the cabin, something deep in his chest trembled like wind-touched trees. She hummed wordlessly at the window, sleeves rolled past her elbows, and handed him bread wrapped in clean cloth without ceremony. It was imperfect, burnt edges, uneven texture, but tasted like belonging. It's good, he said simply. I wasn't certain I remembered how. It'll come back. Maybe not all of it, but enough. Storm clouds rolled in like ancient cavalry, darkening the sky in minutes, shaking glass in its frames. When thunder rumbled and wind kinged like voices pressed against the walls, she flinched just enough for him to notice. He draped wool around her shoulders without fanfare. They stood before the hearth while weather raged outside. In another life, she whispered to no one in particular, I think I lived near the sea. Never saw the ocean myself. Closest I got was a river moving too fast to cross. Something like... A smile touched her lips at the image. Weeks later, he found an old piano hiding in the general store's back room and bought it without haggling. When he rolled it into the cabin on a borrowed cart, she stared as if he'd brought a piece of her soul home. She didn't play immediately, just dusted it, ran reverent fingers over yellowed keys. The next evening, tentative notes drifted through the walls. Soft, hesitant, but sacred somehow. He leaned against the doorframe and let the music move through him like memory offered across impossible distance. Did you know music could feel? Like breath? She asked afterward. Only when it stops, he replied. Their days began filling with purpose. She sewed curtains to soften harsh edges while he carved new drawer pulls. She brought prairie flowers in mason jars. He built her a piano bench. One morning she read French poetry aloud from a book found behind the hearth. He understood nothing but listened anyway, eyes closed, her voice like water over stones. I don't know what you said, but I think it meant something. It did. That night she left one glove on the table. The bare skin of her hand felt like trust rather than exposure. He asked her to walk with him the next evening, just to the ridge beyond the barn. They moved in matched rhythm, the prairie sighing around them. At the summit they paused, sky spreading wide in orange and lavender, while a coyote called from some distant place. This land feels endless, she said. It doesn't, not really. How? Do you live with that? You don't? You let it live with you? Something flickered in her chest, then not affection yet, but steadiness like stone beneath her feet. Why did you buy the piano? She asked at the cabin door. He hesitated. I saw your hands that first day, how you moved them when you thought. Nobody was watching. They were meant to touch something that remembers. Her breath caught. She stepped inside before words could come. That night she dreamed differently, not of blood and smoke, but of linen dancing in sea wind, fingers flowing over ivory keys. A man who listened without demanding. Waking, she found his shape in the rocking chair by the window, book unopened in his lap. Elijah, she paused, then took a breath. I used to be called Evelyn. He looked up, meeting her gaze. Used to be? I don't know what I am now. Then we'll discover it together. The room held its breath, then quietly exhaled. Morning came silver and cold, frost clinging to tall grass like whispered secrets. She planned to ride to town alone for the first time, flower and thread, simple errands that felt like small victories. You certain you're ready? He asked. I need to try. I want to feel normal for a few hours. If anything troubles you, leave it and come back. Nothing in that town matters more than your peace. The general store squatted, sun-faded and familiar, the same bell rattling above its door like a dry cough. She moved slowly through aisles, savoring ordinary sounds, boots on old floorboards, rustling sacks, murmured conversations of lives smaller than the one she'd fled. Near the hairpins, a voice cut through the mundane comfort. My God, is that... She turned. A man stood at the counter, eyes locked on her with sudden intensity. His clothes were dusty but fine, accent too polished for these parts. Baroness, it is you. The word fell like a stone into still water. She didn't speak, hands stiff at her sides. We thought you dead. Your uncle sent letters everywhere. You were supposed to... I am not that woman anymore. Her voice was low, hard as flint. But what are you doing here? Dressed like a housemaid. I am no one. I suggest you leave me be. He stared as if seeing a ghost, then nodded, stunned. She turned and walked out, bread forgotten. Thread still clutched in her fist. Elijah knew something had changed the moment she returned. Her movements were tight, precise, eyes like a bolted door. He didn't speak as she unsaddled the horse only. Followed her inside and waited. She stood by the fireplace, back to him, staring at glowing coals. Someone recognized me. What did they call you? Baroness. She turned then, eyes fierce and fragile. My full name is Evelyn Darmoy, daughter of the late Lord Adrien Darmoy, heir to the line of Marseille. The weight of truth settled into the room like approaching thunder. I was meant to marry a man chosen by my uncle. I didn't love him. He didn't care. I was currency, that's all we are in houses like mine. I ran. That wagon was supposed to take me far enough that no one would ever call me that again. I never meant to lie to you. You didn't. I never told you the truth. You were surviving. That's different. She watched him, chest rising and falling. You aren't surprised. I'm not the kind of man people lie to because they think he'd understand. I'm the kind they lie to because they think he'd forgive them when they finally can't. And do you? He looked at her, full of something vast and aching. There's nothing to forgive. I saw who you were before you said a word. You saw a woman you wanted to fix? I saw a woman who didn't need fixing, only room to stop running. Her eyes shimmered. She pressed a hand to her mouth. I don't know who I am without that name, but I can't carry it anymore either. Then don't. Who? Am I? You're the woman who plays piano with her whole soul, who burns bread but tries again, who sleeps with one hand in a fist and the other in prayer. That's who you are. Her breath broke. She stepped into him, hands trembling. Do you think I could stay here, just as Evelyn? He reached out slowly, brushed a strand of hair behind her ear. You already have? That night she didn't sleep in the side room. She stood beside his bed, uncertain. I'm not asking for more than rest, she whispered. You don't owe me more. She slipped beneath rough cotton covers, the space beside him warm with unspoken promises. They lay facing the ceiling, not touching, their closeness built of shelter rather than hunger. As she drifted off, he whispered, You're safe. In the darkness, she finally believed it. The next morning brought silver light and frost clinging to prairie grass like frozen tears. Evelyn rose first, moving quietly through the kitchen, slicing apples, grinding coffee. When Elijah stirred and sat up, she was already waiting at the table. She looked at him fully and for the first time since speaking her name, didn't flinch. I don't want to hide, she said. Then don't. The world might still find her. Her uncle might send others men who knew how to make women disappear. But Elijah's response came steady as stone. Then I reckon they'll have to come through me. That's no small promise. It's not made small. They ate together, talked about nothing important, the sky, the foxes near the henhouse, whether winter would come. Early, but something had shifted, something holy in its plainness. Evelyn had stopped running. Elijah had started hoping. That afternoon he brought her to the cottonwood tree at the property's edge, standing like a sentinel with limbs long and open. Why here? She asked. Because this is where I buried Mary's ring. I figured if I ever loved someone again, I'd bring her here and tell her the truth. What's that? That I thought I was done living. That I'd already seen every kind of love there was. But then you came with ashes on your cheeks and silence like armor. And you taught me there's still more. Her breath caught. She pressed a hand to his chest. Say that again. There's still more. She leaned into him, forehead to his shoulder, wind wrapping around them both. I think I'm in love with you, Elijah Peterson. I know I am, Evelyn Darmoy. As the sun dipped behind distant ridges, they stood beneath that tree knot as baroness and widower, but as two souls who had named their grief and still dared to stay. The future remained unwritten, but neither turned away. Months later, the sky painted itself so blue it seemed divine, stretching horizon to horizon like something blessed. Evelyn worked the water pump with easy rhythm, sleeves rolled up, boots pressed into damp earth. A year ago, she'd never touched such a thing. Now it was second nature. Now it was peace. Elijah emerged from the barn carrying cedarwood, shirt rolled. At the elbows, horses fed, fences mended, broken gate repaired with nothing but persistence and bent nails. He paused near her, watching sunlight catch in her loose braid. "You're watching me again," she said, looking over her shoulder with that soft, knowing smile that came when she was happiest. "I never really stopped." They shared the morning, that way, unspoken things flowing between them like water. Simple, clean, full of stillness earned only through long storms. She cooked with confidence now, cracking eggs one-handed, flipping cornbread like she'd been raised to it. He watched, still astonished that the Baroness of Marseille now lived in a wooden cabin on the western edge of nowhere, barefoot and humming French lullabies over stovetop fires. After breakfast, he took her hand and led her to their ridge where they'd first stood under lavender sky, where her name had returned, where his silence had found words. At the summit, the cottonwood waited, tall and swaying. Beneath it, a small stone sat smooth and unmarked. "You ever going to carve something into it?" she asked, brushing fingers over weathered surface. "Thought about it. But sometimes things don't need telling. Sometimes truth just lives there, quiet. As anything, you always understood silence, and you always filled it with music." They were still there when the horse appeared from the east, its rider hunched forward, dust curling behind like smoke from dry fire. Elijah tensed first, watching how the man moved in the saddle, too hurried, too practiced. Not a settler or merchant. Someone searching. The rider dismounted with careless ease, stood too straight, wore a revolver that shone too bright, moved like someone told what he wanted was already his. His gaze swept cabin, fence, barn, then found them atop the ridge. "Evelyn," he called, tasting the name. "Elijah Peterson. Mighty fine place you've built here. What's your business?" "Family business, yours, mine, hers." He rested a hand on his belt. "The Darmoy name reaches far. People back east still expect her return, important people. She's a baroness after all, and she left debts unpaid." "I owe nothing," Evelyn said, stepping forward, shoulders straight. "I gave up that name when I left." "They think you've been taken or bewitched, but they were wrong. You're just hiding." "No, I was hiding. I'm not anymore." The man stepped closer. Elijah didn't move. Wind had stilled entirely, as if the world held its breath. "You're not coming for her," Elijah said. "Not now, not ever." The man glanced at his weapon. "You going to stop me?" Elijah didn't answer. He didn't need to. The air around him had changed, not aggressive but rooted, immovable. Strength born not of violence but conviction. Evelyn stepped beside him, not behind, not shielded, beside. "She's not going," Elijah said again. "She's chosen her life. You can ride back and tell them that, or stay and find out what it means to threaten someone with nothing left to lose." The man considered him, then looked again at Evelyn. "You're wasting your title, your legacy. I'm living." "That's more than I ever did under that name." Something in her voice reached him. He looked away, spat into dirt, and without another word, mounted his horse and rode off the way he came. When he disappeared over the horizon, Evelyn exhaled not relief but release. Back at the cabin, she sat by the piano, fingers trembling slightly. Elijah made tea without asking. When he returned, she played a few soft, uncertain notes. "You all right?" "I think so, but I need to do something." She went to the back of the cabin, pulled open the chest where she'd stored her past what little she hadn't burned. From beneath folded linens, she drew out a gold ring set with a pale blue stone that caught light like captured memory. At the cottonwood tree, she knelt, dug a shallow hole with bare hands, placed the ring there, folding earth over it slowly, carefully. Then she rose and looked to Elijah. "That part of me is buried now. I don't want it back." He took her hand without words. They walked back in silence, not the silence of secrets, but the kind that comes after truth, after dust settles and hearts find their rhythm again. That night stars came early. Evelyn stood on the porch wrapped in his coat, staring upward. "I used to think the sky was too big, that I'd get lost in it." He joined her. "And now?" "Now I think I found someone to hold it with." He touched her hand gently. "I never thought I'd love again. Never thought I'd want to. But you, Evelyn, you didn't save me with noise. You saved me with staying." She turned to him, eyes full of every unspoken word. "Elijah, marry me." He looked at her, not surprised, not uncertain, just certain the way. Only those who've lost everything can be. Yes, I'd marry you 1,000 times in 1,000 lifetimes. In the quiet prairie night, beneath sky wide enough for second chances, they kissed not as baroness and widower, not as survivors, but as souls who had chosen each other beyond title, beyond tragedy, beyond the noise of the world. They married a week later under the cottonwood tree, with only wind and birds as witnesses. She wore a dress she'd sewn herself. He wore a clean shirt and his father's boots. They said no vows. Their entire story had already been a vow. Afterward, they sat on the porch, hands entwined, watching the sun melt into earth. You think the past will ever come back? She asked. Maybe, but if it does, it won't find us waiting. No. It'll find us living. As stars returned, blinking open one by one, the land around them seemed to lean in, warm and vast, as if holding out its arms to two souls who had dared not just to survive, but to stay, to love, and to begin again.